Alright fellas, Nate Diaz versus Masvidal just happened, and well, it definitely was an interesting one. I think this was a bout that went under the radar for many, as the postponement didn't really help the promotion. I think a lot of people were just wondering, is this fight actually going to happen? But yes, it did. And I think it was way more competitive than many were thinking. So today I want to talk about the undercard, the fight itself, and what's next for the both of them. So let's get right into it. Of course, this bout was their second meeting after their UFC bout in 2019, which Masvidal came out victorious. Diaz entered the world of boxing after he ran down his UFC contract and took a fight against Jake Paul last year, in which Paul won, of course, by unanimous decision. Masvidal, over the last couple of years since his last UFC fight, has been rumoured to enter the world of boxing. He was strongly rumoured to fight KSI, yet that fight never happened. Instead, he took the role of a promoter with his Gamebred Promotions company. Fast forward, when this fight was announced, I think it kinda came out of left field and no one really took it seriously. I think the main factor for this was the company that promoted it. The promotional company which was putting on this whole event was called Fanmio, and then the only other boxing event they had promoted before was Mayweather vs Logan Paul, and the whole production back then was all a bit odd and gimmicky. Originally, this fight was meant to be on June the 1st, yet because of other competition on that date, they decided to move the promotion to July the 6th. Throughout the last week, I think the build-up has been what you would expect, with really the only noteworthy thing being when Streamer Neon mouthed off and got chased out of the building by Diaz's team. Of course, there was bad blood, and look, I really didn't expect much truly out of this fight. Diaz's performance against Paul was yes entertaining, but it was nothing special. But I would like to say that I was pleasantly surprised. I think both fighters took this fight way more seriously than I would have thought. Obviously, both fighters were in top condition and they took their camps serious enough for both of them to fight 10 rounds without really gassing out. Although both legends, they are both now 39 and both have taken a lot of damage through their careers, and I think that makes today even more impressive. They both went out there and put on a real show for the fans. The fight itself was a real push and pull. 1,394 punches were thrown between the two of them. There was a lot of volume, yet only 182 landed for Masvidal and 151 landed for Diaz. When it comes to those punches, Masvidal tried his best to actually box. His technique was a lot better than Diaz. Yet faced with a Diaz who's moving towards you, swaying, throw most of the time, slaps from every angle, it's hard not to get dragged into Diaz's game, especially when your boxing experience is pretty limited. Masvidal would often find himself backed against the ropes. Diaz would be throwing a bunch of punches or slaps really with not that much power on them, and he would throw a string of them, and then Masvidal would fire back with looping punches and jabs, occasionally getting a combination or two in, with Masvidal's punches having a bit of power on them. And that really sums up the whole fight. From a judging perspective, I wouldn't want to be a judge. This fight I think would have been a terrible fight to judge, with of course the judges ending up siding with Diaz. Depending on who you prefer, you could make a case for either fighter. Do I think Diaz won 98-92? Nah, I thought that was a bit rough. But overall, it was a highly competitive fight which really could have gone either way. Before we get into what's next for the both of them, I just want to recap the undercard. When the people making this undercard, it seemed like they were going with the strategy of we can't afford any of these real notable names, so let's just get their mates and family. Some examples of this of course include Amado Vargas from the famous Vargas boxing family, Ryan Garcia's brother, Shane Mosley's son, and of course Mayweather's protege Kamel Moten. Although all these boxers are solid in their own right, it was pretty clear that really other than Kamel, the main draw to the rest were the names that they bring with them. Yet out of these fights, I would say the ones to go back and watch if you haven't already definitely include the Amado Vargas vs Sean Garcia fight and the Kamel Moten fight. The Vargas-Garcia fight was just a fun, high-paced sort of bout, which entertained, and the Kamel Moten, if you don't know the name, what rock have you been living under? Almost a Tank 2.0, the 18-year-old is one of the most exciting prospects in the sport, and any fight of his is worth watching currently, so if you have a bit of spare time, I would suggest going back and catching up on these two bouts. Yep, back to the main event. Their futures definitely look interesting moving forwards. For Masvidal, after the loss, he's in a bit of a tricky situation. Fanmio has him on a 3-fight contract, so who's next? Well, of course he would want the rematch, and I think that's incredibly likely. Fanmio would have had a lot more success with this event than they would their last. I wouldn't be surprised to see a repeat. Other than that, I think any retired UFC fighter could also be on that list. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Masvidal versus a Woodley or even a Mike Perry depending on how his fight against Paul plays out. For Diaz, the win is good for him. In the boxing realm, other than the Masvidal rematch, he also wants the Jake Paul rematch. Do I think he does any better than he did last time? Probably not, because Jake Paul is going to fight on his term and at that heavier weight. It will just be the same thing round 2 if it actually happens. Diaz also said he wants another run at the UFC title, calling out Leon Edwards. But let's be realistic, do you see him beating say an Edwards or a Bilal Muhammad? I don't. I think he would have the better chance against Edwards, yet I don't think the UFC are even going to consider that. I think if Diaz comes back to the UFC, they're going to look for the biggest money fights possible, the McGregor trilogy included. Yet, only time will tell, and if I was going to have a punt at what's next, I would probably guess a rematch. They're now tied at 1-1, the storyline's there, and there's probably more interest in it now, so I reckon it happens. But now, I want to hear what you think. What are your thoughts about the bout, and what do you think is next? If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking or subscribing, and anyways, thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.